So Trudeau's announced some infrastructure spending. That's good. But there's a bit of a problem in the way he's doing it. We saw this happen in the United States. The Obama administration came out and they said, we need infrastructure spending to create jobs. And so they spent some money on infrastructure spending, and it didn't really have the expected result. And then what ended up happening was that there was this big political backlash. Okay, and the infrastructure packages ended up being used by the right as a justification for austerity measures, which have created an even worse situation. But the thing is, like, everybody saw this coming. I've pointed to Krugman in the past as sort of the well, like I say, he does a lot of writing in the public sphere, so he's very accessible. But he's also kind of is it Krugman with 2 Nobel Prizes, I think? So, this is the guy that knows what he's talking about, and he's accessible. He writes things that are readable for the general public. And he was pointing it out from the very start. He said, if you don't spend enough on infrastructure, it will not have the effect that you want. And sure enough, exactly what he said happened. And Trudeau is in the process of making the same mistake. I think it's very clear at this point that the Trudeau administration is basically trying to emulate the Obama administration. I think that's a big error. I think that if the Prime Minister's office, if the people behind Trudeau, you could see the campaign slogans and everything, but it's like, you just kind of shrugged it off and said whatever, right? It was hokey and and stuff, but it's whatever works, right? But now that a little bit of time has come by, we can see that the emulation is it's a lot stronger than might have been obvious. They seem to be looking at the Obama administration as successful. Okay. Perhaps politically successful, but they haven't really been very successful from a policy perspective. And it's kind of weird for Canada to look at like what are they going to introduce Obamacare? What would the Canadian Liberal Party see of interest in what Obama has done over the last 8 years? Again, I've pointed this out a few times, but you would think that if there was a political institution in Canada that would want to learn from the Obama administration, it would be the Conservative Party. Because the Obama administration has been considerably to the right of the Conservatives in Canada, right? So it's hard for what are they? The only thing they could gain from studying the Obama administration would be to swing the country hard to the right. I don't really. It just doesn't seem like a meaningful thing to study. Canadian demographics are not close to American demographics. The Canadian Liberal Party is nowhere close to the American Democratic Party. What is your? I suppose the naive kind of way to look at it is that it's a really lazy analysis, right? It's like, let's just pick the first thing we can find without really trying to figure out if it actually fits or not, right? And if you look at the things that, as I pointed out before, I think everybody can see that it's pretty clear that the major reason that Trudeau managed to win the way he did was that Mulcair fucked up badly. And the reason he fucked up badly was that he came out again, I'll say it again, Mulcair promised to balance the budget. Trudeau said that doesn't make any sense in this particular time, and this infrastructure thing has something to do with that. Could you imagine the Democrats running on deficit spending? Could you imagine Barack Obama standing up and saying, "We promise that we will run a deficit. We will never balance the budget." That's not exactly, he said he'll balance the budget in 4 years, but it wasn't the in 4 years part that created the contrast. It's the we're going to spend now part that, And the reality is that the Prime Minister of Canada got elected because he promised that he would not balance the budget. He got elected because he promised he's going to run deficits. That's why he got elected. Despite the media won't accept it, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But what are you gaining from looking at the, if Trudeau wants to gain something from the Obama administration, what the Trudeau people should be doing is they should be looking at they should be looking at the way that they failed and trying to learn from their mistakes. And one of the mistakes that they made was that their infrastructure spending was far too low. And it didn't have the kind of meaningful job creation. Of course, I mean, I don't think I need to explain to the Trudeau people that the unemployment rate has gone down because people have stopped looking, right? And if that's their long-term plan, is to shuffle people from unemployment onto disability, I guess. I don't think. I mean, the Liberal Party is a little bit more. The Liberal Party in Canada actually does not like state aid. It doesn't like welfare because they're liberals, right? So I mean that doesn't make any sense, and especially I mean this particular iteration of the Liberal Party seems to be a little bit further to the right than I mean, despite the election. That's the and I'll say it again, is that Trudeau could not have been. I mean, we were on the brink of electing the NDP, and we were on the brink of electing the NDP because we were fed up with the Liberals running on the right. But then the NDP stupidly pulled to the right. Had the NDP swung even further left, they would have won in a landslide. They would have destroyed the Liberal Party. There would be no Liberal Party had the NDP run on the left. At this point in time, the Liberals would have probably merged with the Conservatives. And, I mean, it is far more likely that the Liberals will merge with the Conservatives than they will ever merge with the NDP, right? So, this is what we have here, right? We have, unfortunately, the Trudeau people wanting to emulate an administration that has been an abject failure because they were politically successful. A lot of the whole bipartisanship thing, the whole it's like, look at the result of this. Do you want gridlock? Do you want a parliament that can't function? Do you want a political system that's unable to work? Obama has been an abject failure as a I mean, he was successful as a politician, but his governance has been a total failure. He's not going to be remembered as a good president. And not much is going to survive. Just the other day, one of the major insurance providers from Obamacare pulled out of it. I've read some articles suggesting that, because of Obamacare, no. Okay, 10 years from now, there will no longer be an Obamacare. I don't want to say whether it's going to go to single payer or it's going to go back to what it was, okay, but what he set up is unsustainable. It will collapse. And if anybody remembers him at all, it's going to be, as somebody that set up ideas that didn't work. Somebody that was unable to pass legislation in Congress that had an opportunity to, but blew it. I think Obama will probably be remembered a lot like Harper was. And I've said this before about Harper. Harper will probably not leave a legacy. I remember that, the issue came up, people started talking about it, and they kind of couldn't figure out what Harper's legacy was. There isn't one. At the end of the day, Harper is going to be a name in a list. They might remember something like an icebreaker he built, or some money he released to build a bridge here or there, or kind of thing, right? But I mean, if you look at the list of Canadian prime ministers, there are names like Charles Tupper that nobody really remembers, right? Another one like that is Louis Saint Laurent. Although I think that maybe Louis Saint Laurent is a better comparison to Jean Chrétien, who is also not going to have much of a legacy, right? And if you look at the list of American presidents, there's all kinds of people in the list that you just nobody knows who they are or what they did because they didn't do anything of importance. They held the office for 4 years or for 8 years, and just nothing happened during their presidency. And that's going to be Barack Obama. I'm sorry, but it's the damn truth of it. His foreign policy was continuity. He didn't add anything, he didn't change anything, he just carried on exactly what Bush set up, and it looks like Clinton's going to be next, and Clinton will probably make it a little bit more hawkish, and what you're going to see in the long term of history is you're going to see continuity, you're going to see Bush and Clinton kind of, and Obama just kind of disappear, because he didn't do anything. On climate change, somebody's going to have to do something eventually. Obama didn't do anything. He doesn't have any signature policy. And he can't sit there. And he's going to try and sit there and blame the Congress, but he can't actually do that because he had the opportunity. And this is what Trudeau wants to emulate, because it was politically successful. I think that it's possible, okay, and really necessary to separate the political successes from the policy failures. And I can't complain. I mean, I may caution in reading too much into, the campaign slogan, right? And realizing that Canadians saw Trudeau as a lesser of three evils, right? And point to the extreme unpopularity of the incumbent and everything else. I'm just cautioning against, suggesting that the emulation of a campaign strategy is the reason that he won, because I don't think that's true. But at the very least, it worked. It's working okay, but that doesn't mean that you want to follow his policy proposals. And first he came up with the bipartisanship thing, and now he's making the same mistake that Obama made with the infrastructure. And so I just want to point out, okay, that nobody, no academic, no civil servant, no politician, really thinks that this is sufficient stimulus for meaningful job creation. If he pushes the amount of stimulus that he's pushing through, what's going to happen is the same thing that happened in the United States, which is just like stasis, right? It might stop things from getting really bad, but I mean, in Canada we have systems here. It's not actually going to solve anything. They'd have to spend way more to get any kind of measurable result. Which is, I'm not taking a right-wing position here. I'm not saying that means you shouldn't have infrastructure spending. No, we need infrastructure spending because we're behind on it. We need the work done, and because that's what a government does, right? This idea that if government doesn't do infrastructure, then what does government? Why do we have a government if it's not building roads, right? And so he's setting himself up for a fall here, because you can bet, okay, that the right-wing media in Canada is going to do exactly what the media in the United States did. They're going to look at the numbers. They're going to say, look, all this infrastructure spending didn't work, so therefore we should, eliminate government spending. And look, he created a deficit in the process, right? He's setting himself up for a fall here. But I mean, the problem is the messaging. The problem is what he's saying. It's not what he's doing. He's doing the right thing. It's just that he's not saying the right thing. What he should be saying is that this is a modest stimulus. It may have a small effect in maintaining jobs in certain industries, and kind of declining markets kind of thing. If you spend a lot of money on construction, it might help prop up, a little bit. You're gonna have to buy the construction stuff from somewhere, right? And it'll help with that. But what are the construction workers going to do? They're going to take the money and they're going to go spend it on Walmart, and it's going to fly out of the country, and it's not. It's not going to do what people expect, right? But here's kind of the other angle that they should be pushing as well. It's pointing like in the article they're talking about, the Premier of Ontario is saying how it's really nice that we have a federal government that's foolish as well, because it sets up that dynamic. It says, well, the Liberals want to spend money on infrastructure, the Conservatives don't. Look, it didn't have the effects that they want, so therefore let's do what they say. Which is screwed up logic. Like, it's not logic. That's all. It's fallacious reasoning. But that's what the media will present. That's what people will react to, right? When the actual reality is that Stephen Harper and the Conservatives had no deficit of infrastructure interests. They spent money on infrastructure. The Mulroney government before them spent money on infrastructure. The Conservative Party in Canada will spend money on infrastructure. They're not like, the Republicans in the States. They're not going to, try to shut down Parliament based on, a budget deficit. And in fact, it's not even the reason why we're going to have a budget deficit. If you look at the infrastructure amounts that the truth is that they were both promising infrastructure amounts. It was more along the lines of that the incumbent, Stephen Harper, was just not being honest about the numbers. It's not that the Conservatives would have slashed anything and not run a deficit. The Conservatives ran very big deficits when they were in office. And the reason that we're having a deficit right now is not because of infrastructure spending, it's because the price of oil has gone down. It's because of the amount of revenue decreased. So that connection isn't even really there, right? So it's just a question of being real, Are you going to stand up there and say that, this infrastructure spending that's really the same as the last government would have done anyways is going to create? No, it's not. And then when the numbers come out and there is not job creation, the opposition is going to be able to use that. If you went out there and said, okay, in order to fix our crumbling infrastructure, or there are positive economic benefits, right? You build a transit system, people can get to work, and jobs want to be close to transit options when they know that a large amount of their working population is taking transit. There's some positive economic effects to it. But to suggest that the amount of stimulus that they're using or that they're pushing through is going to have the kind of multiplier effects, it's based on the theory you're promoting, it won't. If you do the math, you'll find out that, wait a second, this isn't going to create jobs. Based on the theory you're trying to argue for. Which I do actually support. I support Keynesian ideas. I'm a socialist, but the math works. I have a math degree. I can look at that and say, okay, that makes sense, right? And I can look at the historical reality of it and say, in the past it has always worked. But what it means is that you have to spend a certain amount, right? Or to put it another way, garbage in is garbage out. If you don't spend enough, then you don't get the result that you want. Which is, like I say, exactly what happened down there, and exactly what's going to happen up here if they keep with this. So, in light of all of these, important issues about job creation and infrastructure spending, what is the media focusing on? Oh, it seems like the health minister went over budget by $500 on travel expenses. Yes, folks, $500. That's scandalous. How could she spend $500 over budget? Do you know what her budget is? You know what? You know what? I think that fairness and accuracy in media reporting should push for. They should push for percentages rather than dollar numbers. Okay. Instead of saying she's $500 over budget, they should say that she's a 0.5% over budget, if it's even that much. Because of course, you know, if the media was being honest, it would do that. But it's trying to push a story, right? The thing is that the audience isn't even there. The reality is that nobody cares. But the media is trying to frame it in a specific way because they're trying to generate that, right? The media will not acknowledge that Trudeau won because he promised to not be fiscally conservative. And they are reacting to his promise to not be fiscally conservative by pushing through fiscal conservatism or a fiscally conservative narrative, which is forcing him to react to it. All the media, all the very right-wing media in Canada wants to talk about is the budget. They want to frame every issue in terms of budget expenses. And as I point out, there was an important infrastructure announcement today, but all the media wants to talk about is how much it costs for the ministers to travel and do promotional work. I frankly don't even care, okay? But if I did, like $500, or was it like $4,000 on photographs was the other one? It's this constant, dull, boring as fuck narrative about expense accounting. You wonder why no one cares about politics? Because all the media reports upon is expense accounting that nobody fucking cares about. And it's all directed at these crusty old aging fucking baby boomers. They get their paper in the morning and their coffee, I spent $500 of my tax money. Like stop with this, okay? This is destroying the country. We need to have meaningful discussions about meaningful issues in the media. Not a bunch of stupid bullshit about expense accounting on fractions of a percent of the operating budget. It's one thing, you show up, you look at the media. If the health minister showed up and had gone over budget by 300%, or you notice that there's $1 million missing, and then you'd have to scratch your head and say, gee, where did that money go? Fractions of a percent, guys. So I really think that he needs to do everything that he can to not just reject the narrative, okay, but to ridicule the people that are pushing it down, okay? To make it a part of his mandate to no longer have this discussion, because it is. He was elected on a platform of rejection of fiscal conservatism. That's why he won, because his party was the one that rejected these arguments the loudest. And he should be looking at the media and saying, guys, we had an election. And what the people told us is they don't give a fuck. So stop pushing down this narrative. How about this? I hope that as a successful G8 country, the Minister of Health can get around in a relatively affluent way. I don't want the ministers that represent my country, being taking a horse to work. I want them to demonstrate that we live in a wealthy country and that we have the ability to present ourselves in an affluent manner. This is a minister in a G8 country. We have the wealth, and we should be flaunting it. And that's what young people are going to say. Young people are not going to look at the minister in a limo and say that they're wasting the money. They're going to look at the minister in an Audi and say, why can't we afford to put the minister in a limo? So yeah, the minister needs to get around and know she's not going to take the bus, and the media needs to get over it. Okay, so and he has an opportunity here, I think, really, to go over the media's head, and point out that they're completely missing the point of where the culture is. We don't live in a culture that emphasizes or worships austerity anymore. This whole Calvinist work ethic, like, not only is it not the last century, it's the century before. We're in the 21st century now, guys. And we don't want to conserve things. We want to flaunt our wealth. In fact, if you look at what he's doing, it's a big part of it, right? I want the minister to have a nice car. And I want the government to have a certain level of affluence, projection to it. Because I recognize that we live in a wealthy country. And if you want to live in your wood stove in Indiana, see you later,